This week proved one thing with AI. We are entering an era of AI migration where it's no longer just about features in terms of why people choose to use a certain product. It's also about trust. I don't know if you happen to see this, but this week, Anthropic actually turned down a military contract with the Pentagon in the United States because they felt like certain safety measures weren't going to be in play with their tools in terms of what they were being asked to do for these contracts.
Mhm.
And OpenAI immediately stepped in and took over and took on the contract.
Wow.
Yeah. Claude has been number one on the App Store all week. People are absolutely losing trust. It's one thing, okay, if you want to make a political statement where you're like, I don't agree with how OpenAI approached this military contract, so I'm not going to use them. It's another when it feels like, oh gosh, if they're willing to do that for the government, what are they willing to do with your own personal data? And
Yeah.
so I feel like for that reason, a lot of people are now making decisions based somewhat on trust and whether or not that is a real concern for your everyday user. That's probably an argument to be had. But the point is, it's how it makes users feel.
Totally. That makes sense. I did kind of hear about the headline because in the New York Times, they do a little quiz about like if you've been up to date with your news. And I actually answered the Anthropic one correctly that they had turned down. So I had heard about it and I had actually had a couple friends, coworkers say, "Oh, did you hear we're not using ChatGPT anymore?"
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay. And why?" So that aspect of OpenAI jumping in is new to me.
It's such an interesting moment for this to have happened, right? Because already I feel like Anthropic with Claude was positioning themselves to be the more trusted tool with their Super Bowl ads that we talked about, where they
Mhm.
weren't going to use personal information to advertise to you on very specific things. Now they've positioned themselves as like more cautious around certain military surveillance, whereas OpenAI is like, well, we'll take it. So I think people are starting to ask themselves with their tech, like, what actually aligns with my values? This is one of the first times we've seen users have a real choice in the matter. If you think about something like Facebook, there weren't really any competitors in that era. If you started to not agree with their data policies, which they changed over time, you didn't really have a choice to go somewhere else. Also, think so many people have been working with their, let's say, ChatGPT for like 2+ years, right? And it has so much history about them. It's incredible to even have the option to migrate systems. This is something that I think, early internet people and people who care about privacy would say about browsers. Like,
Mm,
I don't trust Google. I don't trust, whatever it may be. And browsers like Brave came to be these options for people who were looking for something that wasn't so surveilled.
yeah.
It feels a bit like that, only even more personal. Obviously, your Google history knows you well, but like we've talked about, there's really nothing that knows you like the conversational nature of a chatbot.
It'll be interesting to see how long it lasts
Yeah.
because either people will make this switch to Claude or to Gemini and be really satisfied and continue to move forward and feel like they've made kind of a moral choice in choosing what they're going to use. Or like we see with some strikes, or sometimes people just saying, okay, well, I've stepped away for that for a while. And now, oh, yeah, I guess I did start to use it again. That'll be an interesting to see. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. It will be interesting to see the longevity that people choose to use Claude versus going
Mhm.
back to ChatGPT. I think, though, that a lot of people will probably stay with Claude. And the reason being that Claude has a lot more optionality when it comes to running your own agent without requiring you to do a lot of steps that otherwise might be needed on other platforms at the moment. And people are really developing preferences and wanting to get their Claude bots to do things for them. I was watching a
Mm,
video yesterday where this woman used a Claude bot to update all of her Shop My links on the page. She set it
Wow.
up, she prompted it, and she just watched it change the links on the page
Yeah.
for her. I watched another video where a creator had it update her website. She gave it the creds, and it just started updating everything.
Had a friend that actually used it to do a first edit of his novel
Oh, wow.
and saw in real time essentially what a first editor would do.
Yeah. So I think it has a lot of really interesting functionality in that way that I'm sure OpenAI has. They just haven't put it in the hands of the average consumer. But I think it also kind of shows we're forming these emotional relationships with our tools
Wow.
where we care about like tone and how it talks back to us. We like if it doesn't feel as robotic. We like consistency and we like perceived honesty in whoever's behind the wheel. And I
Mhm.
would encourage people to check out the CEO interview that the New York Times team did this week with the CEO of Anthropic.
Oh, interesting.
It was one of those chats where you're like, okay, another billionaire, and well, you know how we feel about those. But he had some really interesting points that still felt human,
Mm,
which we don't often see for these folks. I think the other thing is that these AI tools are starting to say something about the person using them. They're kind of becoming like a personality trait. I'm old enough to remember when Apple used to send you a little Apple sticker with every device that you bought. And it was a really big deal to like have that sticker and like be on the Mac team.
wow.
People would put it on their cars, on their computer that already had the Apple logo on it, on their notebooks. I mean, it was just like very coded as like I've joined this tribe.
Mhm.
And I think switching from ChatGPT to Claude right now feels like a similar sort of technology change where people are really trying to be like, well, maybe it's safer, maybe they're more principled, maybe it's more aligned with the actual tasks I want to do and the way I think about the world. And I think that's really interesting because, again, when it comes to the social media era, there are few choices there in terms of how you can express yourself without so much algorithmic control. And it's not like there's another Instagram or another TikTok or another Snapchat that have had enough competitive virality to sustain an audience for both platforms that allows
Mhm.
you as the user to really make a choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
interesting.
It is because kind of breaking that down, like, one, it's gonna start becoming an identifier of you
Hmm.
and your communications with people and what they use.
Yeah.
I do think about how someone's a Spotify user, someone's an Apple Music user, and so, like, those little ways
Yeah.
that we've started to identify ourselves and the fact that that's now broaching into the AI that we use is really interesting. This is, like, the moment.
Yeah. This is the next thing
Mhm.
that we choose to define ourselves with in some way. So, if you're thinking about migrating, from what I've gathered so far, there are a couple of tips I thought we'd throw in here at the end. Audit what you actually use the tool for. Do you do writing? Are you vibe coding? Are you researching? Are you emotionally processing something, using it more like a therapist? And you can test various platforms on their workflows. And then there's a really nice feature in Claude, the ability for you to easily import from another competitor. So there's this settings option where it gives you the exact prompt of what it wants you to type into ChatGPT and prompt it. And then you can upload what ChatGPT spits out into that, and it will utilize that in your settings to kind of reprogram Claude so that you don't have to spend the next 2 years like you have maybe with ChatGPT trying to bring it up to speed. The last thing that I'll add is that I did use ChatGPT to pull together some notes for this show, and I was curious if it would give me the real headlines on what happened this week with OpenAI and the Pentagon. And
Mm.
to their credit, it did.
Okay.
because that feels like a potential next step that could happen in AI. Is that the same way that when one person Googles something, their top of page is paid or is something completely different from someone else? It does feel like at some point companies could easily remove those sort of pieces of news to clean up their own image within these existing chat models. And
Mhm.
so I thought it was good that we're not there yet. Anything else you want to add before we close out and I cough my life away?
No. I wanna listen to the New York Times audio piece you were talking about, and I'll give
Yeah.
my 2 cents on this billionaire.
Yeah, I think it's a good follow up from this episode. Some interesting points there. I'll be curious your take. Cool. That's all we got for this week on Nervy. Thanks for joining us for all things emerging tech, wellness, and culture. I'm your co host at Blonde on the Run,
I'm at Weirdo Hour.
and we'll see you next week.